complaints about the Easter Sunday bombings and the investigations and so on. If the Prevention of Terrorism Act did not exist, it would not have been possible to conduct those investigations at all. So you cannot entirely dispense with a statutory regime dealing with terrorism. But the provisions of the law must not conflict with human liberty in fundamental respects. So there's no time now, but I spoke in English in Parliament because the international community is deeply interested in this matter. I normally address Parliament in Sinhala because it's important to keep the public of Sri Lanka informed. But yesterday both the opening speech and the winding up I did in English. So it will be published in Hansard and probably. So we indicated the ways in which the provisions of the PTA will be relaxed in terms of access to the courts, the availability of bail, the role of magistrates and judicial medical officers, and so on. A whole series of amendments, each of which is significant, but in combination, cumulatively, they make a very substantial difference on the ground and represent an appreciable improvement of the existing law. So that's one. Then the President of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Gotabaya Rajapaksa, appointed a commission of inquiry headed by not a retired but an incumbent judge of the Supreme Court, Mr. Justice Nawaz, very perceptive judge. The terms of reference were these: the judge was asked to take stock of work already done by previous commissions. There are three of them: the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, the Udalagama Commission, and the Maxwell Paranagama Commission, named after the chairman of those commissions. And the Nawaz Commission was directed to evaluate the work already done by those commissions and to identify the gaps, the lacunae, and to propose a trajectory forward. What more remains to be done, and what is the best way of addressing the tasks that lie ahead. Now, the judge submitted his second interim report last month, a very interesting report. It was submitted to the President, and it contains some very interesting ideas, one of which is a truth-seeking mechanism. Truth-seeking mechanism. Now, the most famous truth-seeking mechanism in the world is the South African Commission, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, with which the name of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who died recently, is associated. I have asked the High Commissioner of South Africa in Colombo to provide us with all the material that he has regarding the work of this commission, with which I have some familiarity. Long before I came into politics, I have visited South Africa and lectured in some of their best known universities like the University of Stellenbosch, the University of the Witwatersrand, and the University of Cape Town. That's because my doctoral thesis at Oxford University was on the Roman Dutch law, which applies in South Africa and in our country. So I've lectured there, and I know people in academia as well as in politics. So we are now taking a very close look at the manner in which this truth-seeking mechanism functioned in South Africa, and what are the elements of value contained in that exercise which can be productively applied in our own country. You know, successful or a positive experience elsewhere can never be transplanted mechanically into the soil of Sri Lanka. Can't be a carbon copy, can't be a mechanical exercise. Look at it, decide what is of value, but you must have the creativity and the imagination to adapt those elements to suit the permutation and combination of circumstances in our own country. So that is what we are engaged in doing. And the solutions must be in accordance with the cultural mores, the historical antecedents, and the social customs of this country. You can't have a situation where some kind of panacea is evolved in Geneva or wherever and imposed on the rest of the world irrespective of civilizational and cultural differences. It will never work. The solution that emanates from the culture of the West, however good it may be, and many of us have been educated in Western universities and so on, so we find that very congenial. But the fact remains that solutions are not going to be long lasting if they are not rooted in the traditions of the country in question. Solution in Geneva will not, it's not a size that fits everybody. It will not work equally well in Arab countries, in Southeast Asia, in the Caribbean. Simply not possible. Right? So that is what we are saying. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, not at all. Benefit from successful experiences in Argentina. Some of the most successful truth-seeking mechanisms were established in countries like Chile and Argentina in Latin America, and the South African Commission picked up many features and characteristics of those commissions in Latin America. So I told you about the amendments to the Prevention of Terrorism Act. I told you about the work we are doing on truth-seeking mechanisms. There is then an extensive initiative with regard to constitutional reform. The present constitution of Sri Lanka was enacted in 1978. So it is now 45 years old. Almost half a century has elapsed since the promulgation of that constitution. Now, constitutions are not enacted in perpetuity. They must be sensitive to changing social circumstances. And it is obviously opportune to revisit the core provisions of the 1978 Constitution. There have been 20 amendments, ad hoc. But the time has now come not to tinker with the Constitution, not to change provisions here and there, but to critically address the Constitution as a whole and to decide whether a new point of departure is appropriate at this time. Now that's being done. It's being done by a group of experts, an experts committee. Now on these walls you have portraits of very famous lawyers. When I was Vice Chancellor of the university, the President of the OPA, there was Mr. H.W. Jayawardena, QC. There were, I think, Erdly Pereira was President at one time. So you have had very distinguished lawyers. I think you had Carlinger in the TISA, didn't you?
He was a member, no?
No, not president. No.
He was not a president.
Yeah. So you had very senior lawyers who held the presidency of this organization. Now, sorry?
It's a Parakram Karunaratne.
Right, Parakram Karunaratne. Now we have appointed an experts committee consisting of professors of law and leading practitioners. The chairman of that body is Mr. Romesh. Romesh was a. No, I'm thinking of the Bar Association. I'm thinking of the Bar Association, not the OPA. So Mr. Romesh De Silva, President's Council, is the chairman of the committee that is making recommendations with regard to the Constitution. Other very famous lawyers like Sanjeeva Jayawardena, President's Council, Manohara De Silva, President's Council, Navin Marapana, President's Council, they are all members of it. Then several legal academics from the University of Colombo and other universities. There is an emeritus professor of geography from the University of Peradeniya who has been appointed. Now they are actually drafting a constitution bill. It is now in the final stages. They told me that they have sent it to the legal draftsman for this material to be put into the format of a bill for Parliament. They have also indicated that they expect the work to be completed within the next 2 months. Then of course it goes into the parliamentary process. First a select committee of Parliament, which will consist of representatives of all political parties in Parliament, and then they will go through the provisions one by one with a fine tooth comb, and then with the benefit of their recommendations, this bill will go to Parliament for a full debate in Parliament. So that is constitutional reform as a total exercise. We have then other provisions. My colleague, the Minister of Justice, the Honorable Ali Sabri, President's Council, and I spent 3 days in Jaffna recently, talking to people there across the board. We met judges, lawyers, entrepreneurs, government officials, representatives of civil society. We even went into the prison, right across the spectrum, a cross section of society, and we asked them, what are your problems? When I came back, I reported to the President and the Prime Minister. We also briefed Victoria Nuland, the American Under Secretary of State who was here. The main complaint was that indiscriminately large extents of land had been declared as forests. Of course, you need to do that for the preservation of the environment, but like in other things in life, there has to be a sense of balance. If in some areas we were told about 65-70% of the land is declared to be forest. That means you can't enter there. They said you can't enter that area and collect even a few twigs to light a fire at home. You will be picked up and put in jail. Okay? So that means people don't have land to cultivate, they don't have land to build houses. So the balance of it is wrong. That was one. Then a similar complaint with regard to coast conservation. Very extensive areas are declared to be protected for the purpose of coast conservation, matters of this kind. So we are addressing these existential issues, and we are planning to make a visit to the Eastern Province as well. It is also very important to brief the public and to be in constant communication with religious leaders. Every 2 months or so, I visit the main temples in the country. That's very important. You know, if you try to do all of this in the rarefied atmosphere of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you will not be successful, because the current of public opinion may well be too strong. You can't swim, no government can swim against the current, and majorities in Parliament will not be a solution to that problem. So and religious leaders, because of our culture, all religious leaders, Buddhist, Catholic, Hindu, Muslim, have a significant impact on the formation of public opinion in our country. So this is how we are addressing this exercise. And today I briefed Her Excellency Victoria Nuland, the Under Secretary of State for Political Affairs, very comprehensively on these matters, some of the matters that I have just mentioned to you. Next week there is an event of great significance taking place, that is the summit of BIMSTEC, that's happening in Colombo. BIMSTEC is an organization that consists of 7 countries, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Thailand, India, Maldives, and so on. What is happening there is that on the 28th of March, the foreign secretaries of all 7 countries are meeting in Colombo. On the 29th, the foreign ministers of all 7 countries are meeting here. physically, those are physical meetings. On the 30th, the summit, that is heads of government of those countries, will be meeting on Zoom. That is, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa will be connected on Zoom with the heads of government of all 7 countries. And at the summit on the 30th of March, Sri Lanka will be handing over the chairmanship of BIMSTEC to the Kingdom of Thailand. And the Prime Minister of Thailand will accept the chairmanship on behalf of his government. So these are some of the interesting things happening in Sri Lanka. Our basic approach to the international community is that not isolationist. I mean, no country can exist in isolation in the modern world. We have been members of the United Nations since its inception. We respect and recognize the office of the High Commissioner, and we engage with her constructively and purposefully. We do not, however, recognize an ad hoc mechanism that is set up specifically to target Sri Lanka, because it is both illegal and futile. Then we work cordially with other groups of countries like the Non-Aligned Movement, the Organization for Islamic Cooperation, the African Union, and so on. Sri Lanka has very close and beneficial relations with these groups of countries. So these are some of the interesting happenings in the field of international relations at this time, and I thought that you might be interested in a broad survey of these developments that are currently taking place in Sri Lanka and in the region. So I think I have exhausted the time that has been allocated for my remarks, and I will be happy to respond to any questions that you wish to ask me. Not only questions, or to listen to any comments or observations that you have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. It's time for y'all to raise any questions, comments, and there'll be mics that are coming around. Please feel free to ask any of the, yes. Ranavira?
Good evening. I am Dr. Zulfik. I am very happy to meet the minister, second time meet the minister. In fact, what I want to say is, actually, His Excellency the President, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has given a directive on some of the matters where the special ombudsman has sent a letter, several letters, reminders, but only thing is your ministry has not actually replied the letters. I spoke to him also. Then Mr. Haris Gupta, Rohanajir, also was very much interested on my matter. These are very serious matter. It might come out outside Sri Lanka also. But I am very sorry because I want to help the President, because at the moment Sri Lanka is in crisis. I want to bring in foreign exchange, and I have written to your Additional Secretary of Foreign Minister, Mr. Khan. He also helped me to speak to Turkey. But if you can, I don't want to talk on this subject. If you can give me your Honorable Minister for about 10 or 20 minutes on this matter, this is a very serious matter. I don't want to bring it out, where the learned judge in Japan has given a verdict against the ambassador of Sri Lanka that he has made a false complaint, where the documents of the foreign ministry which has been there has been already missing. Now it has gone to that. So I don't want to make all these things. So if you can give me at least about 10 or 20 minutes, I'll be very happy, your Honorable Minister. So I would like to meet you by this week.
Okay, so I can not do the next video, but I mean, I have come here to discuss general issues.
I am very happy that you talk about the human rights, so I'm very happy.
No, I can't discuss.
No, I don't want to discuss on this matter here.
Okay.
I would like you to meet you for about 10 or 15.
Thank you.
Spoken to Mr. Kamala.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Kamalika Peiris?
Professor Peiris. In my reading, I came across a statement that the UNHRC in the various things that I read, I also came across several references that the UNHRC is due to come up for review at the UN General Assembly. I was wondering whether you have any comments to make on that?
Yes. The Human Rights Council is the successor of the Human Rights Commission. Previously, there was a body called the Human Rights Commission, and the United Nations General Assembly decided to replace the Commission with the Council. Why did that happen? It happened because there was widespread disenchantment, widespread disillusionment with the Commission, because it was felt that the Commission was becoming a tool of a group of countries. So the Commission was dominated by one group of countries, and it was becoming an instrument for dominating and subjugating other countries in an unfair way. So there was more and more disillusionment, unhappiness with the manner in which the Commission was functioning, and finally the Commission was abolished and replaced with the present Council. Now our perception is that the Council is going exactly the same way that the Commission went. So this is something that we will take up in appropriate fora, including the General Assembly, and we'll ask, we all contribute, of course in varying amounts. Sri Lanka cannot contribute what the United States does or what the United Kingdom does, but we also make a contribution. So that is public money, and we don't think that those resources are being sensibly or properly utilized. We have already taken this up in the 5th committee. The money that is, it is the 5th committee in New York that allocates money for the Human Rights Council. So all these millions are required that for the pursuit of Sri Lanka. This money has to be authorized by the 5th committee in New York. And our permanent representative in New York, His Excellency Mohan Peiris, a former Chief Justice, has been instructed to oppose in the 5th committee the release, the allocation of any money to the Human Rights Council for the purpose of pursuing Sri Lanka. So we have been able to cut down, to reduce very drastically the resources that are made available to the Human Rights Council, and that is an endeavor that we will certainly persist in.
Thank you, Professor G.L. Peiris. I prefer your professor profile rather than the minister profile. Sir, regarding our foreign diplomatic missions, most of the things that you mentioned, 80% of the material there in the international reports are not relevant to the direct subjects. So if our diplomatic missions are capable of communicating this well to the respective countries, they should have been much better than this. So are you, as a minister, are you happy about our diplomatic missions all over the world?
No, I mean, we have 66 missions abroad, so I can't say that they are all equally good. That can't be, In any institution, you will have the excellent, the mediocre, and the unsatisfactory. Of course, there are diplomats of very high caliber. I have worked in several ministries of the Sri Lankan state, and I can say that in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs there really are some officials of quite exceptional quality who bear comparison with the best anywhere in the world. No, it's not fair to blame our diplomats, because take the composition of the Human Rights Council. There are 12 members representing Western Europe. All those countries are members of the European Union. foreign policy is a subject that is delegated by the European Union to the European Commission in Brussels. So the Commission makes a decision, and all these countries abide by that decision. It's only in very, very exceptional circumstances that a member state of the EU will act or vote in a manner that is contrary to a decision that is made by the officials of the European Commission in Brussels. Right? So it's like playing a match where one side starts with 0 and the other side starts with 12. You can't win that match. The total number is 47. Out of 47, 12 are members of the European Union. So those votes are against you anyway. Whatever you may say, whatever any diplomat may say, whatever any minister may say, they have made up their minds, closed minds. And their decisions have been made on political considerations, as I said, including the influence of the diaspora. So it is not a question, I mean, it's not like arguing your case before a court of law. Court of law, the judgment will be based on an evaluation of the evidence. Evaluation of the evidence and the strength of the legal arguments. Here it's not like that at all. Preconceived. People who come there to listen to you have already made up their minds. They have made up their minds depending on the political interests of the countries they represent. That is what is wrong with the whole system. So decisions about Sri Lanka are made not in the interest of Sri Lankans, but in the interest of politicians in power in other countries who are using Sri Lanka as a political football. I have said that in an interview which I gave. I said our fundamental objection is to the use of Sri Lanka as a political football to serve the interests of politicians in other countries.
So, good evening to all of you. So, more than a year back,
Yeah.
His Excellency appointed the expert committee to look into the constitution of the country and to come up with a new constitution. And in this regard, we also made a set of proposals to that expert committee, and also we had a discussion with them at their office at the DMICH at that time. And my question is, whether that proposal has been finalized now, and also if so, it has been finalized, when it will be presented to the Parliament. Thank you.
No, I mean, it's not final. It's a set of recommendations. It's a set of recommendations by competent people, by lawyers, both practicing lawyers and academic lawyers, at the very top of the tree. These are the best in the country. But that is not a final decision. The formulation of the constitution of a country cannot be left in the hands of experts. They can make suggestions, proposals, but ultimately it is the representatives of the people in Parliament and they alone who can be given the responsibility for drafting a constitution. So that's why I said that the recommendations of the expert committee will be presented to the President. President will send them to Parliament. Parliament will first appoint a select committee. Select committee's recommendations will go to the plenary chamber, the chamber of Parliament, and then it will be discussed in Parliament. And the public, of course, will have the opportunity to make representations. So if you have a point of view, you'll certainly be given the chance to express it.
In the media it was mentioned that it will be presented to the Parliament somewhere in April. Is it true, or?
No, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to have time frames with regard to these matters. You see, the preparation of a complete constitution is a very time-consuming task. It's not something that you can rush in order to keep to a deadline. So we have to, and these are busy people. They are not paid. This is all in an honorary capacity. So they have to combine this with their professional work. We cannot therefore hold them rigidly to any particular time frame, but they are certainly not letting the grass grow under their feet. They are working very hard, and they have indicated to us that in approximately 2 months, I mean, it's not a definite promise or assurance, but they expect to be able to present their report in about 2 months.
actually, we are very proud of you as one of the most, I think, most eminent academics of Sri Lanka, a Rhodes Scholar, where the numbers are very less. I would like to know, since gaining independence, now we are going through some kind of economic trauma in this country. But what are the reasons for this? One, two, how we are going to come out of this in the short term and the long term? Because it has become a pertinent issue that we resolve this. Unless otherwise most of the young people will look for greener pastures out of the country. Thank you, sir. I mean, we appreciate what your comments about foreign affairs, but this is out of it, please.
Well, the short answer is that, to that question, is that we have been living beyond our means. You know, for a very long time we have been living beyond our means. You can't blame one government. You know, this should not be made a narrow political issue. All governments have gone in for deficit budgeting, which basically means that we have spent more than we have earned. The expenditure has been more than the revenue. And today the proportion of the country's debt to GDP, the gross domestic product, is something like 97-98%. So by the time you pay salaries and you have serviced the debt, that is, you have found the interest to pay the debt, the debts that have been incurred previously, there's almost nothing left. It's like a man who has an income, let's say, of 100,000 rupees a month, right? He has employed, say, 4 or 5 people. He has to pay their salaries, and he is submerged in a mountain, an ocean of debt. So as he gets his salary, he has to pay his installments. That is why I think the public service, there is some rule that the total interest payments cannot exceed 40% or something of salary, right? Because you must have enough to live on. Now, the problem is that there isn't enough to live on. By the time you have settled your debts, not you, maybe your debts or the debts of your father or your grandfather, right, previous governments, nothing is left at all. So that is the simplistic answer to your question. It's much more complicated than that, but that in simple terms reflects the picture. So it is useless pointing the finger and say it was you, no, it was, no. That's where we are. So now we have to find a way out of this. Now friendly countries are helping us. The Indian credit line is very useful. We have $1 billion directly as a credit line, which means we can use it to buy food items, medicines, and raw materials for our industries like cement for the construction sector. That is the Indian credit line. About 75% of it should be from India, 25% from anywhere. Then there is $500 million for the purchase of oil. But our oil bill is almost 400 million per month, right? Much of our expenditure of dollars is really on oil. Then there is a 400 million SARC currency swap, and $515 million, that is relief for the what's called the Asian Clearing Union. So all in all, the entire package is worth almost $2 billion or a little more than $2 billion. It will certainly help us to tide over the immediate crisis, but it's not a permanent solution. You know, you can't, it's like going to a friend or a relative and saying, I would like you to help me. When that is exhausted, you can't go again and again and again. It's not a stable arrangement. Therefore, the decision was taken to go to the International Monetary Fund. IMF, two things. One is the infusion of capital. The second, which is no less important, is a confidence factor. When you enter into what is called a program, when you enter into a program with the IMF, other countries and other institutions will get the courage to deal with you. That's important. For instance, the Asian Development Bank, which is based in Manila, now they are also helping, but they would feel more comfortable if we have a program with the International Monetary Fund. And even bilateral donors. Now, if you go to countries in the Gulf, Qatar, for example, produces gas, it doesn't produce oil. The foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, Prince Faisal, was here about a week ago, and I had a long discussion with him. So even countries like that will feel more comfortable if they know that there is the comfort of a program with the IMF. It is a kind of assurance, a guarantee that Sri Lanka's economy will not totally spiral out of control. But then, of course, an IMF condition has IMF program has conditions. Basically, the conditions are to increase expenditure and to increase revenue, and reduce expenditure. In other words, what's called fiscal discipline. In Sri Lanka, you have a statute called the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which says that the budget deficit cannot exceed more than a certain threshold. Now, an IMF program will compel you to enforce that, right? You have to increase your revenue. So that means taxation, and reduce your expenditure, reduce waste, not have unproductive state institutions and so on. So there is a political cost. Governments don't like to go to the IMF. But in the long term, there's really no alternative in the circumstances in which we find ourselves.
So I have a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
Particularly now, when we are working on this economic crisis, Ministry of Foreign Affairs come into play with the diplomatic missions that are there across the world in other countries. How far can Sri Lanka work towards bilateral trade, and maybe through the FTAs and so on and so forth, encourage local entrepreneurs to export and generate export dollar income or foreign currency income? And how far can the missions in other countries can support our country in getting out of this situation?
No, Sri Lanka has 66 missions abroad. 66, and we have told all of them that their focus for this year should be on economic diplomacy. Economic diplomacy basically means non-debt capital inflows. Non-debt capital inflows. What does that mean? That means basically investment, trade and tourism. Your question is specifically about trade, and you asked about free trade agreements. Sri Lanka has only 2 free trade agreements. One is with India, the other is with Pakistan. But we are negotiating with several other countries. China is interested in a free trade agreement with us. Often you start with what is called a preferential trade agreement, and then you proceed, you graduate to a free trade agreement. The private sector in this country is a little skeptical about free trade agreements. That is because of what are called NTBs, non-tariff barriers. You know, free trade agreement will say that you are entitled to export X quantity, let's say 700 million tons of pepper or tea or vanaspati or whatever it is, right? That's the entitlement. But then the devil is in the detail. The devil is in the detail, and there will be other provisions like the country to which you are exporting will have their own regulations. The importer has to get a license. Importer has to get a license. The license is issued only for a quarter, 3 months. Often they make it impossible for you to send the full quantity. Then the importer has to apply for a renewal of the license for the next 3 months. That takes time, you know. Then there are other conditions like, say, let's say perishable things, fruits and vegetables. Sometimes the importing country will say, no, we don't accept the certification of Sri Lanka laboratories. They want to do the tests again in that country. That means demurrage, the perishable goods diminish in value, all kinds of problems. Before I became Minister of Foreign Affairs, at one time I was Minister for International Trade. So the private sector used to come to me with these problems. And there have been occasions when I was compelled to telephone my counterpart in those countries and have these problems sorted out at that level, but you can't keep doing that all the time. So free trade agreements are on the whole not very popular among our business people. They tell you, well, these agreements raise very high levels of expectation, but when it comes to delivery, there are so many disappointments and unfulfilled expectations. You know? So before we enter into other free trade agreements, I have insisted that we must consult the private sector, the chambers, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, the National Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, because it is after all for their benefit. So it is only with their spontaneous and unqualified concurrence that we should consider entering into fresh FTAs.
So, country, we have 60, as you said, 63 embassies. So why don't we have the Sri Lankan fairs with all the Sri Lankan products? We have about 200. So we can get about 10 to 20 billion at the time of crisis. At the time of this crisis, within 1 or 2 years, we can get about 10, 20 billion into the country. That is the best way. Thank you.
Okay, right, we'll try that.
What do you say for that, Your Honorable Minister?
Well, not as simple as that, but we certainly it's an idea. We try to do that. Yeah.
Honorable Minister, thank you very much for your descriptive remarks. My question is, now we all know that there's a crisis of, especially the foreign exchange crisis. So this is something related to your subject. We know that substantial numbers of employees working elsewhere, but now they are reluctant to send their foreign remittances to Sri Lanka due to the current rates. So they may use Havana or India or something like that. They may have some political issues also with the current regime, but I know every Sri Lankans, they love to this country.
Yeah, of course.
So irrespective of the ruling parties or rulers, they love. So my question is there any mechanism, can't you implement some mechanism to win them and tell the true story, ask their support to overcome this situation, because I think the foreign remittances, the amount is substantial, maybe about $4 billion or something like per annum. So my question is, rather than central bank implementing various rules and regulations and trying to fix them, why don't you have some mechanism using your diplomatic missions all over the country, win them and try to get their remittances through the proper channels? Thank you.
No, actually the remittances are more than what you think. It's almost 7 billion. It's about 6.7 billion. It used to be in that range before these problems occurred. No, it's like this. There was a shortfall in the remittances because of the huge disparity between the actual value of the dollar and the artificial depressed value. You know, we were holding it at about 203 to 205 for a long time, right? When the actual value of the dollar was as high as 265, 275, like that. So a person, let's say, who's working in the Middle East and who wants to send his savings to his family to build a house or whatever, obviously he's not going to send the money through the normal channels because he'll collect only 205, but through Hawala and other methods, he will get 50, 60 rupees more for each dollar. So that's what happened. That's why the money was not coming in. But then the decision was made to float the rupee. So that problem no longer exists. Now money is coming because now there's no difference between going to Hawala and sending it through the official channel. There may be a marginal difference, but people are prepared to take a loss of 5 rupees or 7 rupees to use the official channel and send the money to a proper bank. But if the difference is 75 rupees, then that won't happen. So that problem arose because of the very significant disparity between the actual value of the dollar and the stated depressed value. But now the rupee has been floated. So that problem has been solved. But these are very difficult decisions, the pros and cons. But of course, when you float the rupee, everything goes up in price. So essential food items, everything goes up in price when you float the rupee. So that is why the effort was made for a very long period not to do it. That is in the interest of the consumer, particularly the poorer sections of the Sri Lankan public, to hold it low. But there came a time when it was no longer feasible.
You mean now the remittances are coming?
They have increased. After the rupee was floated, they have increased.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for that very active engagement. I would like to thank our Honorable Minister for that active engagement and providing a lot of insights on the issues that were raised. Since he has another commitment, I thought maybe we could conclude this program. And thank you once again for your presence here. We have prepared a very small token of appreciation to you on behalf of OPA. I would like to present that to you, sir, on this occasion.
Yeah, just before that, no, let me tell you that if there's any way I can assist in your work, I have great respect for professionals in this country. You know, professionals in Sri Lanka are of really high caliber. I mean, I know that because I was in the university for 26 years. So I have worked with university academics of very high caliber, and I retain my links with universities, particularly the University of Colombo. And there was also a short period when I was Minister of Education and Higher Education, but quite apart from that, I am in touch with universities. So if there is anything that I can do to assist you in your work in the OPA, any government assistance that is required, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I will be very pleased to do whatever I can.
Thank you very much for that gesture, sir. Thank you. Vadana to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good evening, Honorable Professor G.L. Peiris, Minister of Foreign Affairs. It is great privilege for me to stand before you to propose the vote of thanks at this great event. OPA is the apex body of professional association which celebrates important national issues, sir. First of all, I must thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and visit OPA in spite of your busy schedule. Sir, you share with us and educated us, giving more information about foreign affairs and as well as the present situation of the country. Especially, you delivered about the importance of the constitutional reforms. Thank you very much for your participation, your thoughts. Also, I must thank our President who initiated this program, Meet the Minister program this year, and he conducted in professional manner this program. Also, I must thank past President Engineer Ulrisi Heva. He is the person who initiated this program when he was the President of the OPA. Also, I thank all the past presidents, those who have attended this great program. I wish to thank all the members of General Forum, Executive Council, as well as Centre members of OPA for their participation at this great event. But not least, I wish to thank Centre Director and the staff of OPA who provided the logistic assistance. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.